since she'd missed more than 3 days at her methadone clinic, they said she's kicked out of the methadone clinic. And even though she'd been going there for years, they made her fill out reams of paperwork and said you have to have a dirty UA with heroin. And so then she had to go find heroin and use heroin. Then I was worried she was going to OD. And that was terrible. Okay, so I'm Frank Davis.
And I'm Gretchen Davis.
And we live in Snohomish County, and I retired from the University of Washington after 45 years. And we have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Mm. And talk about Kara, losing Kara.
Yeah, and I'm Gretchen Davis, and I retired from marketing for First American Title, and I was always in the title and escrow business for my career. But for much of the time we raised our children, I was fortunate enough to be home with them.
And we're here. We lost our middle child, Kara, at age 34 to a fentanyl overdose, accidental overdose. And Kara has a sister that's a couple years older and a brother that's 6 years younger.
How long ago, Frank, did you lose Kara?
6 months ago. Yeah, last summer. Kara grew up in Sammamish Plateau. Pretty idyllic childhood, piano lessons, playing soccer, singing in child singing group. Doing a Indian princess father-daughter group and so on. We had a boat, she had trips to Hawaii. That was her favorite place to go. She went to, Cannon Beach, Seaside, Oregon, went to Disneyland, Mexico. She had a fun childhood. What do you want? Why don't you talk about Kara's when she was young?
Kara was born over 9 pounds, and she was the easiest one to deliver, believe it or not. She was an easy baby. She was just a doll, just like a living doll. And I was so enamored with her giant blue eyes, because I don't have those big eyes. And I was just so excited about that. And she grew up loving the color pink. That's the only color that she ever wore for lipstick, and everything had to be pink.
Her whole life.
Yeah.
She loved pink.
She was a real girly girl. She loved people. She loved laughing. She loved parties. She had a very determined personality.
Strong-willed.
Yeah, I noticed around age 4 she got really determined, and we would butt heads, and it wasn't easy. She then became kind of more difficult for me to raise compared to her older sister, who was much more compliant and kind of always wanted to be a teacher. She just always, did the right thing. And Kara was typically going a little sideways. Like, we'd get on a plane to go to Disneyland, and she was really upset when we had to land at,
the airport?
That we weren't in Disneyland. She thought the plane was going to land in Disneyland. And she did not break out of that upset mood for hours. I mean, this is what we had to deal with. So.
And when Kara was in 2nd grade, she was diagnosed with a learning disability, and we found out in like junior high she had a lower IQ and so on too, and so she qualified for special needs help from the Issaquah School District. In about 8th grade, all of a sudden she was kind of drummed out of her circle of girlfriends. We went away on a vacation and came back, and they had kind of kicked her out, and
no reason why.
We don't really know why, unless they kind of maybe learned that she had some limitations or things. And then when she was about, 16 is when she...
Oh, her first job, right. She worked for Party for Less at age 16, and we got a call from one of her coworkers that, hey, could we come pick up Kara, because she had passed out behind the store on their cement slab. And come to find out, she had eaten an entire package of Coricidin, which was a cough medicine, which later became something you had to get from behind the counter, or is how you say it, behind the counter. But at the time, kids could just go in and buy it. She learned that that was a way to get high.
Yeah. Then as a teenager, she got hit by a car and got some pain pills, some oxy pills, I think, oxycodone, and started, I think, becoming addictive to those. And then she started having some kind of strange behaviors where she'd pour hot water on her hands at work, at a job where she worked at a daycare, or she'd jump off playground equipment in a park, and did some other things trying to get hurt. We realized later on she's kept going to emergency rooms. She was trying to get pills.
Yeah, she was drug seeking.
Yeah, drug seeking. And then when she was about 20, 21, I think, maybe is when she tried heroin. And we had a family Christmas Eve at our house as usual, and had all the family over, and she was nodding off. And I heard my cousin, or her cousin, say, one of her cousins, I think Kara's on heroin. And I was like, what? I was in shock. And she was, but we had no idea at the time. We'd never seen anyone on heroin. Mm-hmm. And would have thought Kara would be afraid of needles, but evidently she wasn't. And that was kind of the first we realized she was using heroin. And then in early 20s was when she got pregnant.
Mm-hmm. I think she became a mother at age 23.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had the one baby son, and then she lost custody because she went to they required her CPS to do 6 months with at a treatment center with the baby, and she somehow got to a hospital emergency room and got on a nurse's computer and had someone bring her drugs at the hospital, and she then OD'd in the facility, in the rehab facility. And they came and took the baby away and gave it to the other grandparents, and Kara was booted out of there, and we had no one told us, which is kind of unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And then we learned about that, and then Kara embarked on a two-year journey, and she won that son back through UAs and counseling and
so
treatment.
Did she get clean
and
during that time?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And she got clean, and things were good. She had a second baby with that same boyfriend, and that was when she got on methadone. Mm-hmm. And she was on methadone and doing pretty good, keeping her away from drugs, going to a clinic in Bellevue. Eventually everything unraveled with her and her kids, and we'll talk about that next, I guess.
Yeah, some of that I thought came from when you're at the methadone clinic, you're in line and in classes with other addicts, and they're all sharing information. I remember her coming out one day to the car saying, "See that girl over there, Mom? She takes benzos." And I'd never even heard the word benzos, and Kara was just fixated on that. And then later she became addicted to those too. And then there was a guy that she found there that she liked. So they started hanging out. His drug of choice was methamphetamines, but he was also taking methadone. So over time, her drug of choice changed. It seemed from heroin to methamphetamine, taking on top of the methadone and some benzos.
Yeah, and when she started with the meth, we had no idea because we hadn't experienced that. And all of a sudden she was getting very aggressive and angry and high-strung. And she ended up assaulting both of us several different times, and was arrested, and the police were here a few times. And you know, it was very difficult. And then there was restraining orders, and they didn't want her to be allowed in the house. And I was paying for her to be in hotel rooms because I didn't want her in the streets. And we spent thousands and thousands of dollars on hotel rooms over different years and different times. And she'd come from hotel rooms back to here and back and forth. And then at some point she started getting kicked out of because of her drug behavior, out of different hotels and motels around Bellevue and Issaquah that we were using. And pretty soon we went through a lot of those. And then meanwhile, after one of those times when she assaulted us here, that's when she was non-responsive in dealing with the social worker and CPS and DSHS and everyone. And so she lost custody of both boys that she had fought.
Mm-hmm. Did
so hard to get.
Did the intervention with police when she assaulted you, did that engagement or interaction with the court system benefit her in any way? Was there a separation from her destructive path long enough to help her get clean? Were there any kind of treatment requirements? Was there anything that actually benefited her?
No.
Or that helped you guys try to repair anything?
No, never was. And I testified sometimes, and I also wrote letters to 2 or 3 different judges in Bellevue and in Snohomish County and asked that they sentence her to mandatory treatment. She also had a few other minor crimes too, but they said they didn't have the ability to do that.
Did they ever tell you why they didn't have the ability to do that?
No. And so that was frustrating. And then she ended up on the streets eventually because she kind of burned her bridges at so many hotels, and we had her in different, I was trying to get apartments for her, and they wouldn't place her in one because she didn't have any work history, hardly, and any, she had a criminal record, and she had no credit and so on, and no current job, and they wanted her to have a current job to live there.
Yeah.
And so then...
And she'd never had a credit card, so she had no credit.
Yeah.
She hadn't built that. And we were kind of okay that she didn't have a credit card.
Yeah.
That could have been dangerous for her.
Yeah. And so we had her in different hotel rooms, and then she was in some housing, and then she got arrested one time and was found on the side of the road. She had been arrested, something unrelated with us, and they found her, they put her in a jail, and she had gotten out and got on the bus from the jail, and they were dropping people off in different cities, and somehow she went to Auburn, where she knows no one and knows nothing about, and ended up at the Muckleshoot Casino there on their property.
Well, that's because the bus didn't take her to Bellevue, where she lived at the time.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of a fail. Why wouldn't they take someone to where they had arrested them, where they live?
Yeah.
Where, you know.
Mm-hmm. So the police
and I
called.
think she maybe was too ashamed to call us. We would have gone to pick her up.
Normally she called. Normally we would have picked her up, of course, and I would have probably got her in a motel somewhere, or brought her home. Well, at that time there was a restraining order, so she couldn't come home. And we even had a lot of trouble getting judges to drop restraining orders because they were kind of fed up with her and stuff too.
So they would put a restraining order, not provide any services.
Right.
But have an expectation for her to resolve her own challenges.
Right.
Magically.
Yeah. Which wasn't going to happen. You're right.
While restricting you from being able to support her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So she was on and luckily that time the restraining order was just with Gretchen. Previously they had ones with me a couple times too. So then the police called me, and she was found on the side of the road on the Muckleshoot property. And I got there, and she was laying on the side of the road and had been there for hours, I guess. And I got a hotel in Bellevue because she couldn't come home and couldn't be left on her own, and was in really bad shape and had been living in the woods there for 2 weeks. And we tried to fill out missing persons reports, and they wouldn't do it in Bellevue because she wasn't last seen in Bellevue. and they wouldn't do it in Snohomish County because they knew she wasn't last here, and so on and so forth. So that was frustrating. And then she was also very upset with us that we didn't like hire a helicopter and find her or something, and not very realistic. And so I got a hotel in Bellevue, and I lived there for a couple months and nursed her back to health. And she wasn't allowed to come here. And so then, since she'd missed more than 3 days at her methadone clinic, they said she's kicked out of the methadone clinic. And even though she'd been there going there for years, they made her fill out reams of paperwork and said you have to have a dirty UA with heroin. And so then she had to go find heroin and use heroin. Then I was worried she was going to OD. And that was terrible. And so survived that, got back in the clinic. And of course, she got kicked out of the clinic many times over the years for bad behavior, or for using drugs, or for not showing up, or different things. And they finally were done with her, and they had kicked her out too. And then about that time is when the hen housing opened up, and she qualified for that program.
How did she get connected with hen housing?
Through DSHS. Okay. Yeah.
They didn't require that you have this credit and this job history like regular apartments did. So.
Right. Yeah. So it was a venue
out
to get her in an apartment, which was always her dream, to have her own apartment.
What kind of apartment did she get? Was it an apartment where there was staff, where people were present, where they would check on her?
Yeah. I mean, the apartment had nothing to do with the hen program other than cashing their checks. So, and no one from hen ever came there to check on her, or no one from the apartment did much. I mean, they just treated her like any other client. And over the course of living there in 2 years, she broke a window. She kicked off her shower faucet on drugs. She graffitied up her door. She called 911 and the police came, and she wouldn't let the police in, I think because there was someone in there and they had drugs. And the police kicked the door in, so they had to replace the door. So it's kind of a miracle in 2 years she didn't get kicked out of there. And then she was going to the methadone clinic in Shoreline, and eventually she burned her bridges with them, and they gave her multiple chances. And you know, their story is long, but we haven't even talked about, you know, she, over the years, when she was early in the drug thing, we had her in 30-day programs and treatment programs, and she completed a couple of them, right? Mm-hmm. I think 2 of them. 2 or 3 others she walked out of the day she checked in. Another one, the same day she got there, she got him to take her to the ER, and then she left and walked out of that treatment center. In Bellevue, her counselor had arranged for her to be in a treatment center, and she was being picked up by a bus to go there. And she'd agreed to go, and then she didn't get on the bus. And so there's a whole history of trying to get her into treatment too. And so at Shoreline, another thing that happened when she was living there, she had some friend who was trying to steal her purse in the parking lot because she had benzos in there and he knew it. And she was hanging onto her purse and being drugged by this truck and got ran over and had a broken pelvis. Mm-hmm. And needed surgery at Harborview and was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And then Gretchen had to go and nurse her back to health. He went there every day for months.
Yeah, I think for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And I held all her methadone, and I would bring her daily, every morning, her methadone, and help her around the apartment. But the crazy of the drug mind was she out of the hospital less than a week, and I found out she'd taken her walker. She was supposed to be in her bed. She'd taken her walker down to the little corner grocery store for whatever, and maybe trying to drum up more drugs. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But she was not supposed to get out of her bed. And there was a little potty chair next to her bed. So when I learned that she'd done, because I didn't spend every night with her, I'd stay there part of the day. And then
you spent some nights with her too?
Yeah, sometimes I'd spend the night. But early on, the very first time I tried to spend the night, she threw a big ugly fit, and I later learned that was because she had intentions to leave. She had, and maybe it was to buy drugs, I don't know, but
So she knows how to make mom go.
Yeah.
So she can go do what she needs to do.
Very manipulative.
So
That's addiction.
yeah.
Addiction causes people to be somebody that they're not.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one time a Snohomish County court had, it reminds me, had so many things happen you can't even remember all of them. And a new one just popped in my head. The Snohomish County court had assigned someone to work with her to get her in rehab and get her in a program and do mental health work with her and treatment and so on. Hopefully a longer term facility.
It was a new hired position.
It was a new hired position.
Yeah.
Working for the public defender's office, and to help someone like Kara, and she actually, we thought it was like going to be a miracle, and this person, after a few weeks, told us that Kara had fired her. And she told us Kara was the most manipulative person she'd ever met in her life. Because she kept agreeing that she was going to do this or do that or go there, and she'd pull the rug out from her and not do things or follow through on things or go into places. And she even got removed from jail to go to, after one of her arrests, to go to a mental health facility for evaluation and so on. And then sabotage that. So yeah, she'd sabotage. A lot of people tried to help her.
Did the courts ever hold her accountable for not following through on requirements?
Not really.
No.
And Hen never engaged with her in a way to help her improve the quality of her life?
No, all Hen did every 3 months was send a letter and want to know if she had the same email, cell phone, address. That was about it. They had no contact with her really.
When these entities engaged with Kara in her life, did it give you any hope initially that maybe this would be a route that would help your daughter improve her quality of life?
Yeah, we'd get really excited when something was up. When she had counselors that really cared for her at the Methadone clinic, that at both clinics, at Shoreline and Bellevue, that tried to help her a lot. And she had that person from the public defender's office. She even had a judge that really liked her that gave her a lot of wiggle room when she was trying to get custody back. He even said, I can't believe I'm not going to do this and follow the steps as I'm supposed to do now, but I'm going to give you one more chance, young lady, because this judge really liked Kara. and then she got her son back. So back to her sons, she didn't see them the last 4 years of her life, right? Because the court was requiring her to have 6 months of clean UAs
before she could have a visit.
Have a visit. And that's pretty cruel when you're dealing with someone like her, because it's pretty hard for her to get 6 months. Yeah.
I agree with that.
And the kids suffered and she suffered because she didn't get to see them. And we've likely been able to see them this whole time. They lived with us off and on and live with their grandparents' family now. And we're seeing them this weekend, picking them up for an overnighter and so on. So that's good. And her 2 boys are 10 and 9 now?
Right.
Yeah.
Almost 11.
Yeah.
Do you think that not having the ability to have contact caused Kara to spiral at all?
Yes. Because she felt she was never going to get there, And ironically, she got to right at 6 months once, and just almost at 6 months a second time, and then immediately used. And we almost think it was because she didn't want to start visits because she knew she'd.
Well, she told me. She stood right there and said, I said, Kara, you were right there. Why did you use? And she said, Mom, because I'm an addict and I know I'll probably use again. And she didn't want to take her boys
to see them and start seeing her and then her disappear again. Yeah, she was worried about that. Yeah.
Right.
And so But yeah, we thought that was cruel. We actually looked into that because we thought it was cruel and found out that it's pretty standard. That 6-month thing was used often in those types of cases, sadly. It just doesn't seem fair.
It does a great disservice to the children and to the parents.
Yeah.
And the last time the boys did see their mother is the day she was arrested here, and they saw the arrest take place.
Yeah.
I don't know why it all happened so fast. You know, we're telling the police what's going on, and all of a sudden they could have taken her to the front porch and shut the door so the boys didn't have to see that, and shut the blinds, because that is embedded in their hearts, and that really, had I known it was going to happen at that moment, I would have ushered the boys into another room. So that was kind of a painful thing. I hope they forget it someday. I hope.
Yeah, they were what, 4 and 5 at that time? Yeah. And so and Gretchen's nephew's wife, she worked for DSHS, right?
Oh, yeah.
She works for DSHS.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah. And she works for DSHS, and she was in shock about that. She couldn't believe that. She said it's so important that the kids be able to see their mom and for the mom to see their kids. Mm-hmm. And couldn't believe that she wasn't able to have visits. Mm-hmm. So
they start giving up.
Yeah.
They give up.
Yeah.
Hopelessness.
Mm-hmm. And Kara's apartment she wasn't allowed to hammer any nails. We said, you can't hammer nails in the wall, but you can tape. And she taped up, if it wasn't the kids' artwork, it was Bible verses.
And pictures of them.
And pictures of her children.
She loved her boys.
She loved her boys.
Yeah.
We have pictures of that to show them when it's the right time. But the hold on her with the drugs was so strong.
Mm-hmm. So near the end of Kara's life, she was having a lot of mental health issues and was in and out of ERs and mental health hospitals. And she did 3 weeks, 2 different times. I testified on the phone a couple of times for them to keep her under observation, telling about all of the crazy things she did. And the judge still released her and didn't sentence her to medical treatment. He just let her go.
And I'd look at all the paperwork and it would say she's stable.
Yeah.
I'm like,
really?
She is not stable.
Yeah.
It was shocking. Even ERs would release her and say she's stable, and sometimes she could hardly stand up.
But in the end, she had a lot of ER visits, and in Shoreline, she was calling so often, they told her to stop calling 911, literally, because she was calling the police and paramedics and fire. They were being dispatched so often to her apartment.
They all knew her by name. The hospital staff knew her by name.
Yeah.
And what was she calling for?
She was
an attempt to get more drugs. I'm having a seizure, or I'm just anything. One time I took her to the ER, and she just, when they finally called her name to go back, she just fell to the floor. And I know it was a purposeful act. She didn't. Yeah. It was to show them, oh, look how weak, or
Yeah. That's a good question. The reason this had escalated, where there was all these calls, is because the Shoreline Methadone Clinic had kicked her out. Her last couple primary doctors she had kicked her out, and she couldn't get a new one. And she's off methadone, she's off the benzos, and so she was using a lot of meth. And she was hallucinating. There was a lot of hallucinating, and I went there several times when she was hallucinating, and she'd call telling us very crazy, strange things were happening in her apartment that weren't really happening. She was harassing her neighbors. That's why I said it's a miracle that she didn't get kicked out. She was just seeking drugs with all these ER visits. And she'd get really angry when they wouldn't give her what she wanted, and cause problems sometimes too at the hospitals. And during that time too, Gretchen had worked hard and found not one but 2 places that had agreed to take care of for 1-year programs. And this is when we thought, this is the golden ticket. And Gretchen told her, this can save your life. And this will give you more than 6 months clean UAs. You'll be able to have visits with your boys when you complete it. You can move back here, you can move back home. And she sabotaged both those
Because they, of course,
programs.
wanted to have the one
Phone interviews, yeah.
when they heard, so Kara, what was your drug of choice? The administrator asked Kara. She started, well, I need, and then she reeled off all the whole list of everything she needed, and she sounded kind of huffy. And
she said, I have a benzo prescription, which she didn't have, and I need that filled by you as soon as I get there. And, just manipulative, yeah.
So she sabotaged that. She'd probably still be alive. She'd still be at that treatment center.
Yeah, and they they said it sounds, Kara, like you're not ready to come here to be admitted. Yeah.
And it was small. It was 8 women, and it was a Christian facility up towards the border. And it had great reviews.
Yeah.
And I met a girl that had been there and loved it, and she knew Kara and said this would be great for Kara.
And they help people get jobs. They place people in jobs from there, yeah. So we were really excited about that. I should mention, too, that another problem we had was in the later years, too, in the last couple of years, trying to get her into different places like halfway houses and long-term treatment centers and so on. They didn't want to take anyone that was on methadone or benzos. You had to be on nothing. And Kara would refuse to do that, too. And so that was another problem. Some places would take methadone, but no one would take benzos. And so that was another problem.
There's a lot of risk with benzos, with folks that are on benzos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, when we started researching those, because we didn't know about those, we were shocked to read it's very dangerous to mix benzos and methadone. Mm-hmm. And and then at one point they decided she needed a second benzo, and they had her on 2 different benzo prescriptions. We about blew a gasket on that one. We flipped out. That was crazy.
2
benzo prescriptions for her. Yeah. And that was the other thing we'd say too about Kara. Say, Kara, how could you're physically impossible when she's on benzos to have visits with your boys, even if you were granted them. I said they would cut off the visit and end it and send everyone home because you'd be in no shape for it the way we see you a lot. Mm-hmm. And the way you talk and the way you talk funny and the way you look and,
Yeah.
Was it ever a surprise to you, her condition under the influence of the medications that were being prescribed, that she was being prescribed those medications and allowed to, or have it be looked upon as positive to be in that condition?
Oh,
yes, we were shocked. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
What about the guy in Issaquah?
Oh, yeah. There was a mental health provider in Issaquah that put her on about 5 different pills. And when we finally got a hold of him, in fact...
Were the pills addictive?
Yeah. I mean, he put her on like like a benzo class. What's that, like level 1 or whatever they call it? But
yeah, I'm not exactly sure what class, but all benzos are extremely addictive.
Yeah, yeah. But he put her on several things that were really bad for her to be on, and ADD medication and benzos and a bunch of like five. He put her on like literally like
Adderall. Yes.
Yeah, like 5 new medications.
That's pharmaceutical methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Right.
And in fact, it was so bad, the methadone clinic reported him to the state.
Oh, yeah.
For him giving her all those prescriptions, which was crazy. And he swore up and down that he had no idea she was even on methadone because she never disclosed that to him. So,
and she probably didn't. I mean,
yeah.
And we wouldn't know about this. We'd learn about these things later. Kara didn't tell us these things. Yeah. Kara told us nothing. So her secrets were safe with her.
How do you guys think things could have been different with these programs, with the courts, with doctors, with the people that have supported her path?
Yeah, the biggest thing was, like I had mentioned, many people tried to help her besides us, as you can tell over the years. We tried to help her a lot. But she did have some really good methadone clinic counselors, some doctors, some judges, some people that tried to help her, and she would sabotage it or refuse it, and it's the biggest problem was that no one ever forced her to do anything.
So
Because
if they were
everyone would
both
say, we can't.
Yeah.
It might have been different.
Yeah, because no one ever held her accountable.
The best she did was when she was first going to the methadone clinic, and she had to have these UAs, and she had classes she had to take before she started really meeting the people and getting involved. I think if I could do it over again, I wouldn't have her at the methadone clinic. There has to be another way, because you're associating with people that are all struggling, and they kind of cling to each other and it just becomes this party.
But I think the biggest thing where the system let her down is that there was all these opportunities to help her, and she just wouldn't take the lifeline, and they could have saved her.
And how do you think they could have saved her? What would have been something that they could have done that would have really helped?
Requirements, just, I mean,
Treatment
and one
required.
agency talking to the other agency, nobody knew what each other was doing a lot. Found that.
Yeah, like
And parents aren't allowed to know. From, I think, age 14 on, you're not.
12.
Oh, it's 12?
Yeah.
That was
I learned that the hard way with my own.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's
Kara
a huge
Kara would
disservice.
sign those ROIs for me, and then I would call the methadone clinic or call the doctor or something, and they'd say, because we'd make a deal like, okay, you can return home, or you can do this, or you can do that, or I'm going to do this for you, or I'm going to help you with that, but I need this ROI. So then I'd call on something, they go, oh, Kara canceled that ROI. Mm-hmm. That allowed them to
She'd
talk
sign
to
it
me.
and she'd immediately cancel.
Yeah, she'd agree to it, do it, and then even the doctors or the methadone clinic counselors would say, Kara, you need to do this. And I'd have them with the methadone clinic, and then I'd call them, and all of a sudden, nope, can't talk to you about her. Mm-hmm. So we'd write emails and send them to the methadone counselors because we knew they were going to read the email, and they couldn't get back to us, but at least we could tell them what's going on, Mm-hmm. But yeah, if she could have had some court-ordered treatment or more accountability, like the HEN program, we always thought should have done UAs, for example, or tried to have maybe a program besides a check, besides money, to do something to help. One of the biggest problems was Kara herself, because she'd always say, she would tell every counselor, doctor, methadone employee, it didn't matter who it was, inpatient doesn't work for me, only outpatient. I do really good with outpatient programs, because she never wanted to be locked up where she couldn't have access to drugs. That was a problem. Yeah.
How powerless did you feel as parents?
Extremely.
Completely.
Yeah. Failures.
Did it feel like no matter, because what I'm hearing is that you tried to employ the support from every agency that you possibly could engage with, and you ended up reaching dead ends.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. And, the treatment centers that she did go through were 3-week or 4-week treatment centers. I just think they need a lot longer than that. That's just nothing. And especially and it should be required, and it should be like the ones I had planned for her. She was like a slippery cat. You could never get her to do what you know would have been good for her.
Yeah, it's like she'd tell a judge she was going to go voluntarily into this mental health place, and then after so many days, she'd just walk out the door and go, this doesn't work for me, I need an outpatient treatment. And so she would drive a lot of people nuts by making deals with them and then not following through on them too. Mm-hmm. And us.
and when she did go to jail, there was no education. I was just stunned that she'd spend, one time she was in there like 6 weeks, I think, maybe 2 months. And I said, well, was there anything showing on the TV screen in your cell? No. I thought, well, there was a perfect opportunity to be educating these people in there with really good, meaningful stuff, but it was just nothing. So they didn't leave any better. Maybe they were clean, but she'd have a seizure. The minute she walked out of the jail, she had a seizure right there in the court steps. So they had to ER her over to the, and I don't know. It's just, she was kind of a full-time job.
Can I ask you guys to talk about when that day happened?
Yeah.
When she passed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd been telling Frank, I could tell, and I read the news and I watch what I said.
You and I were talking a bit around that time.
Yep, and I said, she is a sitting duck. Fentanyl is in everything. Every time we see her, and we'd try and see her once or twice a week, and I'd bring over meals and she wasn't eating them, and it was just, take her grocery shopping. I said, Frank, every single time we see her, you need to know this could be the last, because she uses street drugs and fentanyl is in everything. So, and I pay more attention to what's going on in the drug world than Frank does. I mean, he does watch news, but I'm on more support sites on Facebook. So,
So yeah, you were worried that was coming, and I wasn't worried someone's coming dressed, because, I mean, you were right. But at the time, I just thought, well, she could have died any time in the last 15 or 20 years. I mean, of OD'd. One time she did OD and came real close to death. A couple of times she did. But even that wasn't handled well. At the end, because the King County, when you asked that about that day, the King County medical examiner somehow called Gretchen's brother-in-law. And then he, didn't want to tell her to call Gretchen, so I shouldn't say that. He didn't know what to do. Gretchen's brother-in-law was called by the medical examiner's office. He didn't know what to do, so he contacted his wife, who's Gretchen's sister. And so Gretchen's sister said, oh, I can give you Kara's parents' name and cell phone numbers. And they're like, well, no, we've notified a family member. We've told you, you have to tell her. And so that wasn't good. And so then Gretchen's sister had to call and tell Gretchen. And then I was headed to go meet up with our son to take him to a Mariner game, afternoon game. And then I got the call from our other daughter that Kara had died. And I was like, what? And I didn't know what was going on. And so I turned around and came home. And so I called the medical examiner's office and talked to them. And, nightmare, horrible, one of the worst day of my life, obviously. And it's also because she had so many close calls. She could have died when she got ran over by that truck too. Mm-hmm. So you kind of think she's indestructible, like she has 9 lives. And unfortunately her luck ran out. And then they, told us where she was found. You have a lot of questions, where she was found and how she died and who she was with. And you learn a lot. And they were pretty helpful. There was an investigator that was very helpful there and helped me to get, a copy of the police report and the autopsy and things. But yeah, that was a terrible day.
Mm-hmm. One thought that, first you scream and you yell and you're so angry. You say swear words, you're so mad. And then after a while, for me anyway, I felt relief, because Kara's torture was over. That's the word that came to my mind. She was tortured every day trying to get drugs.
And missing her boys. Tortured by that.
And tortured by that. And so I felt some relief. And I also felt prepared, because I knew it was coming. I just knew it. I even would tell our son, and I'd tell people, if you want to talk to Kara, you should talk to her. I think it's going to happen. And then you realize that our torture is over. Her torture is over, but every night when I'd get up to use the bathroom, she was always the thought, worrying, where is she? What is she doing? And it'd make you sick to your stomach.
Every time you get a phone call from a number you didn't recognize on caller ID, you'd worry she had died before she died.
And every time your phone, because our cell phones don't typically ring too much, you know? So if his phone rang, it was usually Kara. And so even still, if your phone rings, I kind of...
And of course, sometimes she would disappear and we wouldn't hear from her for a couple of days or several days. And so it wasn't unusual. And wasn't good about responding to texts unless she wanted something. Or email. Well, email she stopped using.
Her learning disability, they said she's going to be naive and easily taken advantage of by people.
And she was.
And so we always worried, you know, even though she had the apartment, when you're on meth, you're out walking around the streets. I don't know what she should go to the bus shelter and bring food to people. And I was just so afraid. And she was in kind of a rough part of town, North Seattle shoreline area. And her apartment was a couple blocks west of 99. But she was kind of carefree and careless. She was just, and she loved everybody. She just, you know. So her torture is over, and it helped me to know she's a Christian, and she had that faith. So that gave me some peace.
Mm-hmm.
And
we hadn't talked about cell phones. I probably bought in the last couple of years, 15 to 20 cell phones, literally. Because as you can imagine, she'd lose them or they'd get stolen or get broken. And I'd constantly buy cell phones because it was so worth it to be able to reach her. Because as long as we could reach her, then we'd know she was alive and she was okay, you know. Yeah.
You loved your daughter very much.
Yeah.
She was usually the life of the party.
Yeah.
She just loved being happy and joyous, and everybody adored Kara, you know.
She was a daddy's girl too, huh? Mm-hmm. We were very close. Yeah.
Oh, and Kara, 2 or 3 times before she died, maybe the last 3 months, she would look at me and say, "Mom, can I come home?" Meaning, can I come live at home? And I know the way she said it, I knew that she needed to be here to live. I knew that. But I couldn't allow it because we have 3 grandchildren that live here, and you know, I think there's 6 or 7 of us all together here, and it would be too disruptive unless she was clean. And I'd say every time, "Kara, I would love nothing more, but you have to go to that 1-year treatment center first." And the look of despair on her face, you know, it was just a different look, and it breaks my heart, and I'll never forget it because she asked 3 times. So when we planned her memorial, I said, I really just want to have it here at home, because she just always wanted to come home, you know? And I didn't want it really in a big church because I was afraid of who would come. I mean, I was afraid of some of her associates that might be a little rough. So it was lovely here, and we kind of made it comfortable for her boys, made it geared for them.
If you could share something with parents that are having similar experiences to you guys, what would you share with them?
Never give up.
Well, and I would add this, get them into a long-term treatment early. The longer this drug use goes on, their brains just, the worse it just gets so much worse. There's so much damage, I think, to the brain.
Yeah.
That they kind of they become almost like a different person, you know. So the earlier intervention, and it can't be a 3-week thing. It has to be long-term, and it doesn't have to be an expensive treatment center. I was told by people early on, don't put Kara in one of these $30,000 places. Take her over to what was it called? Sundown M Ranch. Yeah. He said those people don't hardly charge anything. They're in it to help the people. They're not in it for the money. You want a place like that. But I think that one's only 3 weeks. There's one in Orville, Washington, which is the one I wish Kara had gone to. She'd still be alive if she was there. And what's that one? Oh, that one's called Ruth's House. Heard just great things about that one. But it's a 1-year program. And the lady who started it, she's a pastor's wife, and she started it, I think, 19 years ago. And she said, my little tiny town is just filled with people who went through the female 8-bed program or the men's, I think it's 8 beds for them too. They're in different locations. They come here and they go through the 1-year treatment and they stay here. A lot of them end up staying here. They run our church. They work at the bank. They're all over town. And she goes, sometimes I'm driving around and I forget. Oh yeah, they were in our treatment center way back 10 years ago or something, I think that was going to be the ticket.
Yeah, and let them know that they're loved and you believe in them.
Yeah.
If you could say anything to our policymakers and our judges and our law enforcement, and maybe we need to separate all 3 of those messages, what would you say to each of those people or those entities?
People like Kara need mandatory treatment, need court-ordered treatment.
Long term.
And what happens if they refuse to do it? Then what happens next? How is it?
You get a choice, right? Then you go to incarceration. And while you're incarcerated, at least have that TV screen feeding them good, healthy stuff, you know?
Would you rather have Kara incarcerated today?
Yeah, we'd love to go visit her on the weekend or whenever we can. Yeah. We certainly would prefer that.
She always wanted to help people. She wanted to go to school because, when she had well periods where she was doing well, that was her goal. I want to help other people in the drug world. She would have liked to have been a methadone clinic worker or something like that.
She used to like to make up gift bags and bring them to homeless people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to lawmakers, I would say to listen to people who've been there. And because that's where the knowledge is. They've walked the walk, and that's where you're going to get the good answers. People like if Kara was still here and she was being honest, and people like you, Ginny, talk to parents who've lived it. If you haven't lived it, how do you know? How do you know how to help, really?
Yeah.
Do you think it's beneficial? And I feel like you guys have a very good perspective on this. So Kara in her addiction, is it best for people to get that perspective from Kara in her addiction or Kara after overcoming that addiction? Do you believe that you're going to get what you need from somebody in the midst of their mess?
Not Kara.
No.
Not Kara.
And from
Kara's
no one.
not an abnormal addict. I just want you to know that that's pretty consistent
Oh,
with all addicts.
Oh, that's pretty normal?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
are going to tell you anything
To get what they want.
what it is that they need. And when that addiction is alive in an individual,
Yeah.
that beast, it's not your daughter.
Yeah.
That's a
No.
demon that needs to be fed more of those things to keep that individual separate from their ability to make choices.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, we
right.
felt she couldn't make any decisions on her own. And not only couldn't be trusted, but was too clouded by drugs, her judgment.
So much of her mind was spent drug searching, If you could have ever opened up her phone, which we never could, she had her password or whatever, it would have been fascinating to look at who her conversations were with and what they were about. I mean, we can guess.
If you have a message for programs like HEN or other Housing First programs, what would that message be?
I would say that they need to have accountability, whether that be in, interviews on a, 3 months, 6 months, monthly, whatever needed to be done. Interviews, UA testing, I think would be good. Because really, you just put him in a safe and warm environment to use drugs in the end.
It's true. I agree.
Was Kara's drug addiction a victimless crime? And I know people don't like to look at addiction as a crime, but were there people victimized and harmed by her addiction?
Yes.
Can you tell me about some of those people?
Well, her biggest were her 2 boys were a victim. Never able to see her for 4 years, which is kind of unbelievable. And then us, of course. And, we wonder if Gretchen's cancer was brought on by the stress of Kara's life, too. You never know. Didn't help. And then her brother and sister and other relatives and people that love her.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's very therapeutic. I didn't know if I was going to make it through, but I'm glad we did it.
I'm glad you said that it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
Good.
Frank, I want to thank you, and I could tell that you and Kara were very close and that she was the daddy's girl.
Yeah.
But I would like to thank both of you
You're welcome.
for allowing yourself to be vulnerable and share the really important message about your daughter, about her life, and about the really important aspect of her death. I mean, how we can improve,
Yeah.
how we can be more intentional.
And as,
Let's save some lives.
as Gretchen
right?
said, we should do this even if it saves one life, it'd be worth it.
Or helps one parent, or helps one lawmaker to see things in a different light.